Our topic today is a really high-stakes strategic battleground, the new social web. It's all defined by this one premise, one held by a surprising number of entrepreneurs, that building a platform like Twitter is not difficult.
And what we've learned from our stack of sources is that, yeah, the initial technical build might be straightforward, but the strategic and governance challenges are just immense. So the true subtitle of this whole saga is It Got Difficult.
It really did.
When the acquisition of Twitter by Elon Musk, now of course rebranded as X, ushered in this era of, well, spectacular chaos, instability, and distrust, it left a massive multi-billion-dollar strategic void.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a handful of users looking for a new place to post. I mean, we're talking about a mass exodus of key demographics, advertisers, journalists, academics, marginalized communities, all of them demanding a higher standard of integrity.
And that just triggered this frantic race to replace the platform, a race built entirely on the promise of safety and stability.
Right.
So today we're diving deep into the competitive strategies of the leading rivals, Mastodon, Bluesky, and most crucially for our story, Christopher Bouzy's attempt to build an anti-harassment centralized alternative called Spoutable.
Yeah, we want to understand what architecture, centralized or decentralized, is actually winning the battle for long-term loyalty.
The underlying strategic question we're framing this entire dive around is a core business principle: customer acquisition versus customer retention.
It's the classic business dilemma. Everyone can acquire users with enough money or, enough hype, but retention building, a sticky, predictable, and loyal community, that is the true engine of value in the digital space.
So this dive is really for anyone who needs to understand the strategic challenges of building a trusted, enduring digital community in an age of, well, maximum information overload and minimum trust.
Let's get into it.
To really understand the opportunities for Spoutable and the others, we have to start with the monumental collapse of trust at X. Without X's instability, this competition just doesn't exist at this scale.
That's the whole premise. And the commercial fallout since the acquisition is measurable and, frankly, staggering.
It really is.
But we have to acknowledge the paradox here. X maintains an overwhelming scale. I mean, they report 557 million monthly active users globally. Now, even if those numbers are a bit inflated or stagnant, that is a massive network effect.
It's inertia. They have the inertia of scale that no rival can even touch right now.
Right.
They have the numbers, but they've lost the value. Our sources detail that since the acquisition and all the subsequent operational changes, X has hemorrhaged approximately $5.9 billion in ad revenue.
$5.9 billion. And that loss is ongoing, too. The projected ad spend is expected to drop another 4.8% this year.
That kind of commercial volatility, it signals a deep, deep erosion of institutional trust.
And that erosion is directly traceable to the shifting and, let's be honest, often erratic content moderation policies. For major corporations, the ones spending the big ad dollars, the risk of having their products appear next to highly controversial or hateful content is just unacceptable.
So what's the bottom line metric on that?
The most devastating commercial metric we have is this. Only 4% of marketers globally consider X a brand-safe environment.
Only 4%. That is a staggering liability. I mean, if 96% of the advertising industry views your platform as toxic, you can't service a user base of 557 million people. You just can't survive.
And you also see this reflected in overall user engagement, which is falling dramatically. Interaction rates are consistently dropping, which signals that even the active users are posting and engaging less and less. It's an engagement famine, generally speaking.
But there are these pockets of incredible resilience, which tells us exactly what X is still good for. Sports is the prime example.
Yeah, that's a fascinating anomaly.
That niche maintains an engagement rate around 0.07%, which is more than double the platform average of roughly, 0.029%. So why is that specific niche so resilient?
Well, that anomaly shows us that X is still the premier network for synchronous, real-time emotional investment.
Things happening right now.
Exactly. Sports are time-sensitive, highly emotional, and they're often shared communally through live posting. X excels at providing that immediate shared experience during a crisis or, a game-winning touchdown.
And that finding is crucial because it shows that alternatives like Spoutable, they can't compete on that synchronous real-time scale. They have to focus on delivering an asynchronous value proposition.
Things like safety, community, and integrity. things that attract long-term loyal users.
Okay, so X is financially volatile, user engagement is collapsing, yet it still holds massive scale for live events. But here's the strategic blunder that literally paved the way for the rivals.
The API crisis.
X actively pushed away its own innovation base. I'm talking about the API crisis that started in 2023.
This was just strategic malpractice. I mean, the decision to implement restrictive and really costly API access changes fundamentally betrayed the third-party developer ecosystem.
And these weren't just hobbyists, right?
Not at all. These were the developers who created amazing apps like Tweetbot and Twitterrific, which provided functionality and accessibility that Twitter itself had failed to deliver for years.
The result was an immediate exodus. So many essential apps just shut down, and the entire innovation layer that had kept the platform vibrant and accessible for a decade was just hollowed out.
And users who relied on those apps for customized experiences were left stranded. They had nowhere to go but to the alternatives.
The cost increases they implemented were just punitive. I mean, we looked at the comparison of usage tiers.
It's unbelievable. The level of usage that developers used to access for, roughly $200 per month under the old basic tier?
Yeah.
It's now estimated to cost $575 per month under the new usage-based model. And that's slated to be fully implemented by October 2025.
That is an increase designed to kill the developer ecosystem. But tell me, how did this massive strategic blunder functionally subsidize the rivals, specifically a platform like Spoutable?
This is such a critical insight for understanding the business model of these new platforms. By breaking trust and making API access hostile and unaffordable, X eliminated all the established competition for paid API access.
So they cleared the field.
Completely. Spoutable, for instance, plans to offer paid API access as one of its core monetization streams. And that strategy is only viable because X destroyed the goodwill and the existing ecosystem. It created a market vacuum where developers are desperate for a predictable, affordable, and trustworthy platform.
So X essentially funded their competitors' future revenue streams.
In a way, yes. They handed them a business model on a silver platter.
So we have X maintaining overwhelming scale but being commercially volatile and architecturally hostile. The goal for alternatives like Spoutable isn't necessarily to match that size, but to achieve functional replacement for critical, high-value user segments.
And that functional replacement is crucial. It means providing specific tools and environments that journalists, academics, and critically marginalized communities prioritize. They don't need 500 million casual users.
No.
They need a platform that guarantees their safety, ensures civil discourse, and provides predictable governance, even if the total user count is tiny in comparison. And that is the exact strategic void Christopher Bouzy stepped into.
Bouzy's story is fascinating because Spoutable is clearly more than just a commercial play. It feels like it's driven by a deep ideological imperative, one that's rooted in fighting online toxicity.
Absolutely. Christopher Bouzy, born in 1975, has a history that really prepared him for this fight. He grew up lower middle class in Brownsville, Brooklyn, raised by his mother, who was a black immigrant from Panama.
And he found his way into tech very early, right? Coding on a Mattel Aquarius computer by age 9.
Yeah, a real prodigy. He had a successful initial career. He developed encryption software called Cloak, which was later acquired in 2006, and founded a streaming platform called Nexus Radio. He knows how to build and sell complex technology.
But the fire for Bot Sentinel and eventually Spoutable was lit by the specific dangers of disinformation.
The initial inspiration was the large-scale ideological interference we saw during the 2016 U.S. elections. That's what led him to found Bot Sentinel in 2018. But the personal impetus is it's heartbreaking and really essential to understanding his commitment to safety.
Yes, the source material notes the tragic loss of his mother in 2021. She delayed taking the COVID-19 vaccine because, as Bouzy described it, she was just overwhelmed by so many different things she was reading online.
And that's it. The platform's inability to control misinformation had a devastating real-world impact on his family.
That tragedy seems to have elevated his work from just a technical investigation into a moral mission.
It did. It became about proactively protecting people from the digital pollution that has real-world consequences. And that's why Bot Sentinel, the technology that forms Spoutable's very foundation, was designed specifically to hunt down disinformation, inauthentic behavior, and targeted harassment at a structural level.
Okay, so how does that system actually work? We know it's machine learning, but what are the gears turning underneath that make it different from, say, standard moderation?
The difference really lies in its focus on behavior over content.
Okay.
Bot Sentinel relies on proprietary machine learning algorithms trained on millions of data points, specifically tweets from accounts that were already suspended. These were categorized exhaustively as either definite bots, propaganda accounts, or not bots.
So it's not just looking at whether a single post contains a racial slur, it's looking at the systemic patterns of accounts that are likely to violate rules in the future.
Precisely. It institutionalizes a proactive behavioral risk assessment. It measures dozens of specific parameters associated with inauthentic activity. We're talking about tracking things like highly suspicious rapid follow-unfollow cycles, the speed and frequency of posting that exceeds human capacity, even analysis of network structure to find coordinated activity.
And what's the outcome of all that deep analysis?
The outcome is the scoring system. It gives Twitter and now Spoutable accounts a score between 0% and 100%, and that score reflects how closely the account's behavior profile, its posting history, its interaction patterns, resembles accounts that were previously categorized as rule violators and ultimately suspended.
So if an account scores, say, 70%, what does that actually tell a platform like Spoutable?
It tells them preemptively that this account poses a high behavioral risk. This is the unique, patented layer of defense. It acts as a pre-warning mechanism.
Right.
So while platforms like Meta or X often wait for a specific post to violate content rules before taking action, Bot Sentinel alerts the platform to potential trouble before the hate or the harmful disinformation reaches critical mass. It's an early warning system against systemic toxicity.
And we've seen the concrete impact of this deep behavioral analysis in their public work. I remember the analysis they did regarding the organized hate campaigns directed at Prince Harry and Meghan.
That investigation was hugely revealing, wasn't it? They analyzed over 114,000 tweets about the couple and found that a tiny cluster of just 83 accounts was possibly responsible for generating approximately 70% of all the negative content.
70% from just 83 accounts. That just illustrates the massive strategic imbalance in online harassment. A tiny coordinated group can completely dominate the narrative landscape.
And the motive wasn't just ideological, there was a financial incentive, right?
Right.
A later report described these campaigns not just as personal attacks, but as a lucrative hate-for-profit enterprise. These organized online influencers were funded by ad revenue from platforms like YouTube, pushing conspiracy theories that often mimic the patterns of larger disinformation campaigns, like QAnon.
So this is the very specific funded malice that Bouzy is trying to create a shield against.
Exactly. And that work naturally put him in the crosshairs. It's important to acknowledge the real intensity of the opposition he faced.
The environment around digital defense work is extremely contentious.
It is. He faced personal threats, including a false police report made to North Bergen Police back in 2022. And he also had legal challenges, notably the defamation lawsuit brought by an attorney and popular YouTuber Nathaniel Brody, which alleged that Bot Sentinel incorrectly flagged his account.
That lawsuit was ultimately dismissed in April 2024, but it underscores that the creation of Spoutable wasn't just a casual business decision. It was a mission born out of personal tragedy and fueled by the necessity of creating a technological defense against coordinated digital attacks.
So when he said, "I can build a better Twitter," he was really saying, I have the technology to make a safer internet.
So Bouzy takes the muscle of Bot Sentinel and launches Spoutable in February 2023. And the core value proposition is straightforward, and it's a direct strategic counterpunch to X.
An algorithm-free anti-harassment environment.
That commitment to being algorithm-free is a radical choice, almost nostalgic. Spoutable guarantees a chronological feed, showing content from followed accounts in the exact order it was posted, with zero algorithmic filtering or ranking.
It's fundamentally an anti-virality stance. X thrives on algorithms that reward engineered outrage, conflict, and the most extreme content because that generates maximum clicks and ad impressions.
And Spoutable just rejects that model entirely?
Completely. By eschewing the algorithm, they prioritize community depth and, crucially, customer retention over superficial viral scale.
And that's where the business strategy really shines, isn't it? If you can cultivate a highly engaged, dedicated niche, that base is exponentially more valuable than a vast transient user population.
We know that loyal customers can spend up to 67% more over time than newly acquired customers. Spoutable is betting everything on the quality and engagement of its small user base.
That commitment to depth requires absolute control over the user experience, which leads us to their controversial governance choice: centralized moderation.
Right. Spoutable has a central team that enforces strict community rules, handling bans and content removal swiftly for harassment, doxing, and misinformation.
And that efficiency is a huge selling point compared to the fragmented moderation of some of their decentralized rivals. The bot Sentinel integration is what makes their centralization so unique.
It is their technological moat. While rivals like Threads and Bluesky use Teams or standard machine learning to moderate content after it's posted, Spoutable institutionalizes that proactive behavioral risk assessment we were just talking about.
So their centralized team is armed with data on which accounts are exhibiting patterns of previous rule violators.
Exactly. And that allows them to intervene or throttle accounts before a major violation even occurs.
Their community rules are incredibly detailed too, reflecting Bouzy's deep mission. They specifically prohibit misinformation that could impact civic processes and endanger public health.
Or lead to property damage. They also strictly police fake engagement and systematic bot use. It is a platform built specifically for high-integrity civil discourse.
The thesis is simple then. Users who are fed up with toxic platforms are willing to trade the autonomy of decentralization for the guaranteed safety and stability of a centralized platform.
That's the bet.
It makes perfect sense on paper. But let me push back on this. The efficiency of centralization comes with a massive governance risk. If the platform's core promise is trust and integrity, that entire value proposition depends intensely on the perceived fairness and transparency of that central leadership.
Absolutely. If that trust is compromised, the entire edifice just collapses, taking their highly valuable retention base with it.
That is the ultimate moral hazard of centralization, isn't it? The power to enforce rules quickly is also the power to censor quickly.
And users who fled the arbitrary whims of X's leadership are extremely sensitive to any perceived lack of transparency.
And we have immediate evidence of this governance risk manifesting internally, which directly jeopardizes their primary retention strategy. In 2024, the platform acknowledged a security vulnerability that exposed user emails and phone numbers.
Ugh. For a platform whose entire credibility is derived from its ability to combat sophisticated online malice, failing at basic technical security is devastating.
It's an existential breach of the safety contract.
It is. This technical failure suggested critical oversight in their in-house API, which allowed authentication fields to be exposed. For a user base who explicitly signed up because they were looking for a safer alternative, this failure validates every bit of skepticism about the platform's core ability to protect their data.
But the operational failure was compounded by a governance crisis. We have these widely reported allegations that the company deleted user posts after those users questioned the CEO about the very security issue we just mentioned.
And that behavior is strategically poisonous. You cannot build a community based on high integrity and then resort to suppressing critical speech about your own technical failures.
It's a contradiction.
It is. When a user questions centralized authority about a data breach and their posts just vanish, that behavior immediately links Spoutable, however unfairly, to the opaque and unpredictable policy shifts that drove users away from X in the first place.
And this risks eroding the trust of those specific high-retention, high-value users, the journalists and critics who need to know they can speak freely.
It's their biggest internal threat.
Okay, so Spoutable's success or failure depends heavily on how it fares against this complex field of rivals. Each one offers a fundamentally different architectural solution to the problem of a centralized internet. We need to really analyze Mastodon, Bluesky, and Threads to position Spoutable's niche.
Let's start with the veteran, Mastodon, launched all the way back in 2016. It is the purest expression of the decentralized philosophy, built on the ActivityPub protocol.
Explain ActivityPub simply. We need to move past just saying it's a protocol and explain what it actually does for the user.
Okay, so think of it as the shared open language of the decentralized social web. It's similar to how email works. If you are on an independent email server, you can still seamlessly communicate with a user on Gmail or Outlook because they all speak the same language.
Got it.
Mastodon uses ActivityPub to allow its over 8,700 independent servers, or instances, to communicate with each other in what's known as the Fediverse.
That offers incredible autonomy. Your server admin sets the rules, manages content, and controls your data. The user chooses their community, not the platform.
Exactly. The strengths are profound. Full data control, deep niche community building, and user features like a 500-character default limit, content warnings, and polls. This appeals deeply to users seeking ideological purity and complete control.
But the sheer decentralization is also its profound weakness. It leads to complexity.
And that complexity is the steepest barrier to mass adoption. First, the user experience is fragmented. Joining Mastodon requires understanding concepts like instances, federation, local versus federated timelines. It creates a steep learning curve,
A huge hurdle for the average user.
a huge one. And second, moderation is all server level, relying heavily on volunteer admins. So if an instance administrator loses interest or just lacks resources, the community can become unreliable or even toxic, forcing users to migrate their profiles, which is a significant administrative hassle.
Okay, now let's pivot to Bluesky. This is the heavily funded, newer, decentralized option that has just exploded onto the scene, launched in 2023, open to the public in February 2024.
And it reached approximately 33 million registered users by March 2025. Just incredible growth.
So why? What's the appeal?
Bluesky offers the best of both worlds, architecturally speaking, which is why it achieves such rapid scale. It maintains a centralized feel. A single company handled initial invites and moderation. But it is built on a novel, fully open and decentralized protocol, the AT protocol.
So how does the AT protocol fundamentally change the user's relationship with their data compared to ActivityPub or X?
It introduces the concept of data portability. Think of your social media identity, your followers, and your content not as living inside the platform, but as residing on a portable hard drive that you control.
Okay, that's a powerful idea.
The AT protocol separates the elements: hosting, distribution, and curation. Your identity is portable and cryptographically verified. If you don't like your host, you can move your data to a new server without losing your social graph.
That is a massive promise for user empowerment. And their approach to algorithms is also radically different.
It is the core appeal for ex-Twitter power users. Instead of relying on one platform-controlled algorithm, Bluesky users can choose their own algorithmic feeds, they call them app view services, to curate their timelines. You could pick a feed that only shows breaking news or one that filters out political content.
So Bluesky appeals to users who demand a familiar Twitter-like experience, but also crave control over who sees them and what they see. They want customization.
Whereas Spoutable promises simplicity and pre-filtered safety. That's the strategic contrast. Bluesky's complexity is in the customization. Spoutable's simplicity is in the guaranteed safety.
But what's the catch with Bluesky?
The challenge for Bluesky is that despite the decentralized protocol, the centralized Bluesky company still currently manages the primary infrastructure and all the moderation. So there's a lot of skepticism about how decentralized the governance truly is right now.
And finally, we have to acknowledge the largest threat by network scale. Threads, the meta rival.
Threads is a behemoth, purely due to the meta machine. Its seamless integration with Instagram instantly granted it access to a billion-strong existing user base. It immediately solved the critical acquisition problem that plagues Mastodon and Spoutable.
Threads has also promised future integration with ActivityPub, aiming to federate and connect with networks like Mastodon. This sounds like a great move for an open internet.
It sounds great, but it introduces what you could call the federation paradox. Despite using an open standard, Threads is meta-controlled. The risk is that Meta's massive size could eventually re-centralize the network by sheer market dominance.
Like how Microsoft and Google dominate email despite it being an open protocol.
Exactly. They could set de facto rules that everyone else has to follow. And crucially, Meta has explicitly sought to de-emphasize political posts on Threads, trying to keep the platform lightweight.
And that ideological decision is perhaps the most vital piece of strategic context for Spoutable.
It is. By intentionally reducing high-stakes civil and political discourse, Threads creates a clear, uncrowded, and extremely defensible niche for Spoutable. If you are a journalist, an academic, or an activist, you need a high-integrity platform explicitly designed for those conversations. Threads won't be it.
But Spoutable is aiming to be. So, to synthesize this landscape, Mastodon offers ideological purity but extreme complexity. Bluesky offers technological customization but is still testing its decentralized governance. Threads offers instant scale but carries the baggage of Meta.
And Spoutable, by contrast, must leverage the simplicity of its centralized, bot Sentinel-powered safety framework to capture the users who prioritize security and civil discourse above everything else.
Okay, let's shift now entirely to business viability, because this is where the core paradox of Spoutable becomes so apparent. We established that retention is a far stronger ROI driver than acquisition.
With loyal customers spending up to 67% more over their lifetime, Spoutable has achieved retention success, but it faces an acquisition catastrophe.
So let's analyze the numbers. The October 2025 independent traffic estimates, they lay this critical dichotomy bare.
The acquisition challenge is dramatic. The platform recorded only 289.54 thousand visits per month. In the high-stakes game of microblogging, where X has over 500 million users, this number is critically low.
It's a rounding error. It suggests they need exponentially greater customer acquisition just to approach profitability.
And the bounce rate suggests the acquisition they are doing is highly inefficient. At 72.34%, nearly three-quarters of visitors arrive, take a quick look, and leave immediately.
They are failing to convert initial curiosity into committed usage. Why?
That high bounce rate tells management that visitors are likely disappointed by one of two things. Either the small network size, if only 289,000 visits are happening, their friends probably aren't there, or the specific lack of algorithmic buzz they may be used to from X.
But the retention success is equally striking, and this provides the glimmer of hope. I mean, look at the average session duration, 17 minutes and 47 seconds.
That is fantastic stickiness. It means that once a user gets past those initial hurdles, they are highly engaged. That 17 minutes and 47 seconds is irrefutable evidence of successful product-market fit within a small, dedicated niche.
Those are the users who genuinely value the core safety mandate that Bouzy promises.
They are.
So this dictates their strategic imperative. They have to maximize the lifetime value derived from this small, highly dedicated base. Essentially, they need to focus on making those high-value 18-minute users feel like kings.
Because those loyal customers are their only viable revenue stream right now.
So what about their financial trajectory?
It shows cautious but focused management. The company is debt-free. All previous debt was fully repaid in the second quarter of 2024.
In a space typically defined by massive venture capital dependence and years of cash burn, being debt-free is a massive strategic advantage.
It is. It allows management to prioritize long-term product integrity, their safety mandate, over the short-term, reckless revenue chasing that often happens when a company needs to service massive debt.
And their planned monetization streams are pretty standard.
Display ads, premium subscriptions, and that coveted paid API access that X vacated. They are targeting profitability by Q3 2026.
That Q3 2026 timeline, though, is incredibly aggressive. Given their current user acquisition rate, what kind of growth would they need to hit that goal in under 2 years?
To move from their current volume of under 300,000 monthly visits to a volume that supports profitability by Q3 2026, they would likely need to achieve user numbers 50 to 100 times greater than their current estimates.
50 to 100 times. That makes the variability associated with slower than anticipated user growth the single most significant threat to their financial projections. It's an uphill climb that demands almost immediate exponential scale.
And that profitability rests entirely on maintaining those high standards of brand safety, the very thing X lost. They need bot Sentinel to guarantee that advertisers will return, seeing it as a quantifiable, defendable business metric.
Which brings us back to the critical internal risks. Their primary competitive advantage is trust, yet that trust has been repeatedly tested by operational and governance failures. It threatens to undermine the entire retention strategy that defines their business viability.
It's the central conflict.
I have to challenge the premise here. The platform is built on trust and a promise of technical superiority against malice. Yet they exposed user emails and phone numbers in 2024 and allegedly deleted user posts when people questioned the CEO about it. How can that 17-minute session duration possibly survive that level of catastrophic failure?
That is the core conflict. The security failure exposing contact data was an existential crisis.
Yeah.
It suggested that their in-house technical controls were fundamentally lacking, contradicting the very expertise they built bot Sentinel on.
So users who flee X for safety will immediately question their choice when their own data is exposed.
Immediately. And the governance crisis, the alleged post-deletions, is the moral failure. It confirms the inherent weakness of the centralized model. Too much responsibility resting on one individual's subjective judgment.
And users who are hypersensitive to the arbitrary policy shifts of X simply will not tolerate opacity or censorship on their supposed safe haven.
Not at all. If Spoutable cannot maintain total transparency and accountability, particularly regarding their technical failures, they will bleed the exact high-value, socially conscious users they have successfully retained so far. That is why the biggest threat to profitability is not customer acquisition failure.
It's retention failure, driven by an internal loss of trust.
Precisely.
So, we've concluded this deep dive into the chaotic but strategically essential race to build a genuine microblogging alternative to X. Christopher Bouzy correctly identified the massive market gap for a high-integrity platform and possessed the unique technical toolbot Sentinel to address it.
And his platform, Spoutable, has achieved powerful internal metrics. It's boasting nearly 18 minutes of average session duration, which confirms product market fit for a specific high-value user segment.
But it struggles intensely with customer acquisition, reflected in that critically low traffic volume and the high bounce rate, compounded by serious internal governance risks.
Based on the current strategic data, we see two clear scenarios for Spoutable's future market position.
What's the first one?
The first and currently the highest probability path is niche sustainability. Spoutable will establish itself as a highly profitable, high-integrity platform focused tightly on its dedicated, paying-based journalists, academics, marginalized communities who are willing to pay a premium for safety assurance and civil discourse.
So it secures a valuable and highly defensible niche without ever matching X's scale.
Exactly. The second scenario is that it becomes a strategic acquisition target.
Interesting.
If Spoutable successfully navigates its governance challenges and secures its valuable user base, the proprietary bot Sentinel technology becomes a massive strategic asset. It could be extremely attractive to a larger rival, like Bluesky, that needs an immediate, proven, and deployable anti-disinformation shield to secure their own platform integrity.
What this entire journey confirms is that the initial assertion that the technical difficulty of building a rival platform to X is solvable was true.
It was, especially with specialized proactive technology like bot Sentinel.
But the strategic difficulty isn't in the code, it's entirely in the governance. The true high-stakes hurdle determining whether these new social platforms can survive is the challenge of balancing centralized efficiency with guaranteed user trust and transparency.
So we leave you with this provocative thought to consider. As the social web fragments, where do you, the user, ultimately place your value? Do you choose the ideological purity and difficult autonomy of decentralization like Mastodon?
Or the algorithmic control and flexibility of Bluesky? Or do you choose the promised simplicity and guaranteed safety of centralization, even if it means placing ultimate trust in a single leader, like on Spoutable?
Your choice is what defines the market that will eventually replace X.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.